Is there a time when secrecy is actually a good thing?
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you at part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
State Senator Donna Nesselbush would probably say yes, and the Senate President would absolutely say no, because he said so again here Monday on our State of Mind. It is great to have you aboard. This is a process conversation that has a lot to do with how leadership in our state is chosen, elected, and it's a little wonky, but not really. So don't get yourself feeling like you can't follow this. It's really important that you pay attention to how our leadership gets elected, and there's a little bit of controversy over it right now, so we'll get to that tonight. Nice to have you aboard. Thank you for tuning in on this Thursday evening. Clearly the White House is abuzz. Just a couple of notes here, trying to keep up with the news cycle. As you know, we record the show early afternoon. You see at 7:30 on Meyer ITV and Fox Providence at midnight. I don't know what happens by that time, but at least now we've got a Manafort possible pardon burp up by the president, which is clearly part of his kamikaze routine. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that this is a suicide mission. This is just, you know, he's going to fly that plane in because at the end of the day, whatever happens here is going to be about impeachment and then adjudication in the Senate. But I'll tell you, the more that he rattles on about this, the more that he floats the idea of pardon, the more even the Republicans who are holding on for dear life for all sorts of political reasons are going to start to have their knees wobble because they don't like this word and they don't like this threat, right? So just think about that. In the meantime, we've got Michael Cohen pleading guilty to the specifics discussions about the Tower meeting, right? And that, of course, another, you know, suicide type of, and again, we don't like to play around with the term suicide. The data is up. I mean, but you know what I'm talking about. It's all poetic license here. The headline here from Trump is that his guy is just weak, right? He's weak. Let's hear what he says.
He was given a fairly long jail sentence, and he's a weak person. And by being weak, unlike other people that you watch, he's a weak person, and what he's trying to do is get a reduced sentence. So he's lying about a project that everybody knew about. I mean, we were very open with it.
Okay, very. He's playing this game in his lane, and he thinks his lane is infinite. Somewhere down the line, his lane's going to have a block. And it's going to be his own Republican Party who finally is going to have to say, that's enough. And here's where it may start to erode. Here's the Saudi headline. See this in the Providence Journal today. There is very clear bipartisan concern about this Jamal Khashoggi situation and how the Yemen military action is going to be supported. And the answers are not coming clear. And when you get a briefing for the entire delegation and you don't get the CIA director to participate, they're not happy. Republicans are not. We know Democrats aren't happy, but we know Republicans aren't happy. That's where the erosion very well may occur. And that may be part of their out. So this is going to be really interesting. The whole thing just conflates in ways that are very, very complicated. All right, listen, there's a local issue here that I have hardly the time to get into in depth. But we've spent a significant amount of time on it on the radio, weekdays 3 to 6 on WPRO, have for the last 3 days, most likely will tomorrow as well. If you live in South Kingstown, or if you love Rhode Island, how's that for a wide specter, come to the South Kingstown School Committee meeting and watch an attempted Saturday night massacre. Yeah, this is, you know, that's a little hyperbole, but let me tell you, it's for the right effect. In South Kingstown, you have a high-ranking National Education Association executive by the name of Sarah Markey, who clearly is a very talented and strategic individual. She was up for an appointment to the school committee there a year ago, got the town called for an ethics evaluation by local council to the school committee about possible conflicts of interest. Well, duh. School committees are supposed to have a friendly adversarial relationship with the unions, right? So you put the union official onto the school committee, no, she's going to bump into a conflict of interest on negotiations, on personnel matters, and all those kinds of things, and issues like employment, because there's a couple of closed school issues going on in South Kingstown. So the opinion was as clear could be, right? Now, this is a school committee agenda, a little too soon on that, Eric, but here's the point. You should go to the, all right, so I just got ahead of myself. Go to the school committee website in South Kingstown and follow what happened earlier this week as they attempted to fire the lawyer who gave the opinion. Now, how did that happen? Well, one Ms. Markey got elected. Got a little ahead of ourselves there. She got denied an appointment to the school committee in 2017, but 5,500 not so smart citizens in South Kingstown voted her in without doing any diligence or, you know, maybe a civics lesson about how this is a conflict of interest. She's in, and she's a one-woman wrecking machine on all that is good, all that is ethical, and all that it makes management and taxpayer protection sense in South Kingstown. There ought to be fireworks at this meeting on Friday, tomorrow night, and I think there's going to be a lot of media coverage for this. Maybe this thing will slow down, and maybe people will understand that this is not the way we ought to be doing business, and it's important not just for South Kingstown, but for the entire state, because although I agree with the NEA on X number of issues, they know that they have unsportsmanlike conduct going on right now, and they are going to continue to push it all the way through everywhere they can, not only here in Rhode Island, but nationally, because they're upset at a Supreme Court decision, the Janus decision, which I empathize with them on, but this is not the way to reconcile it. Did you get any of that? I hope you go to the meeting. Listen to the radio tomorrow, because we'll have a lot on it as well. Okay, let's get to the issue of the day. Here's a headline that inspires our conversation, and Senator Nesselbush, along with Senator Sam Bell, yes, thank you, Donna, who was here earlier last week, yeah, are carrying the torch for what I think is a really interesting conversation that I also think I empathize and perhaps agree with. Welcome in, nice to have you.
Thank you.
The way we elect leadership in this state is under scrutiny. Give me the executive summary of what you're trying to accomplish, and then we'll elaborate in the next couple of segments.
Well, Dan, I've just been voted back into office, so this will be my
Congratulations.
fifth. Thank you. This will be my fifth term. And really, when President Paiva left was the first time in all of my time as a senator that I saw a leadership transition. And I have to say, I was just so shocked. I was shocked, and I was really appalled for democracy. And based on what I saw, and again, I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but I decided to introduce a bill that would regulate somewhat the transition of power, of leadership. And that bill would have sort of slowed the process down so that you could possibly encourage others to run and, you know, put their name in. And it would also make sure that anyone who wanted to run could run. And I also wanted there to be a secret ballot because, you know, what I have seen is that, you know, unfortunately our legislature has a, you know, old school playbook of this rewards and punishment. And as long as Rhode Island has the current system that we use to elect leadership and a system of rewards and punishment, Rhode Island will never be able to reach its full potential. We're going to continue to be 45th, 48th, 49th, because it starts at the top. You know, we have to do things right, and we have to support candidates for leadership. You know, nobody ever meets with us and says, "Oh, this is my view for the future of the Senate. This is what I think we need for the state of Rhode Island, and these are the changes, whether they be rule changes or other." The senators. No candidates for leadership meet with us beforehand and tell us what their vision is for the future of the Senate or the state.
Because it's understood. The program is understood.
Listen, you know, to me, and again,
business is being done, and everyone kind of knows where they fit.
you know, things happen behind the scenes, and you know, phone calls are made, and you know, to me, it's also a smoke and mirrors charade. And people say, oh, so and so's got the votes, so and so's got the votes, and because people know the punishment that will befall them, they're like, oh, Dan York has the votes, I better be with Dan, otherwise my career is over.
Right.
And so, you know, it's not a fair way to transfer leadership when our state is also, you know, burdened by a system where those 3 people at the top of the Senate, and arguably perhaps 1 or 2, same thing, 1, 2, or 3 on the House, and the governor, they're running the whole state with far too little input from rank and file reps and rank and file senators.
Right. Now this is some Democratic, not party, but process phlegm that's being coughed up here. You may not like the analogy, but it's exactly the metaphor, but that's exactly what's going on here. Whether there's a antibiotic is the question. We'll talk about it when we come back.
I'm new to the presidency of the Senate.
Yeah.
However, I worked very closely with the previous president of the Senate, and I watched how things shook out. I have never exacted any kind of retribution upon anyone for voting what you might call the wrong way. Look, we could go up there and 38 people will have different feelings about any piece of legislation up there. That's how it works. You can't help the variety and the diversity that exists up there. So, I mean, will they lose committees?
I think
No.
she'll point to Senator DuPont and others, and I'm not here to fight their battles. So there was a longer conversation, but that's Senate President Ruggiero, who has more or less denied that there's, I mean, you heard him.
I heard him.
You laughing?
I'm laughing.
Okay, so I figured you'd laugh. Let's reset. So Senator Nesselbush is saying leadership by vote by the senators in the Senate ought to be done in a secret ballot, just like when you go to the voting booth, you're able to vote without anybody seeing what you're doing. If you want to talk about it, that's your option, but you can go ahead and vote secretly. Let's break down a couple of things on this process conversation. On the House side, they had a caucus which was closed, a Democratic caucus, meaning after the election, all the Democrats get together and more or less signal who they're going to formally vote for first for the House Speaker, the Majority Leader, all the way down the line. There was some protestation outside that caucus in Cranston this particular go-around. The Senate President, though, Riley, smiles over the idea that the Senate Democratic caucus was open. Let's just talk about that. Did you feel good about that?
Well,
in other words, it was publicly covered.
Actually, I would be fine with that as long as we use a secret ballot, because it's, you know, again, I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but it's very important to know that Rhode Island has Democratic hegemony over the state. The Republican Party, 5 people in the Senate,
right,
and you know, had dismal showing in the recent elections. So we basically have one-party rule. But you have to sort of think of either whether you want to think of, I was recently in Italy and talking about the Communist Party and the Socialist Party and the Social Democrats and the Progressive Democrats. And, you know, if we were in a state that actually had robust political parties, like a moderate party even, you know, once elections are done, those parties, by law, are free to meet, and the Communist Party can elect their leader, should they win any seats in you know, Parliament in other countries, things like that. These small political parties, the public has no fundamental and no legal right to know what goes on inside the meeting of a political party. This is very clear in the open meetings law, and there is a clear 2-paragraph, which I've sent to you, distinction between legislative bodies and public bodies and political parties. So, again, the public has no fundamental or legal right to have those caucuses open, and if you were to think of the small moderate party, you know, would they have to publicize their debate on who should lead them?
No. So I'm guessing, I also don't want to make your argument for you, but I'm guessing that you're probably going to tell me that opening up the Senate Democratic caucus last week or whatever was nice, but the law doesn't require it, and it's kind of, I don't know.
Red herring?
Well, red herring or fake left, go right type of.
Fake transparency.
Right, it's like, hey, we opened the doors. Doesn't mean you didn't discuss everything prior, you know, in another room. Doesn't mean that last week you didn't make a deal. And everyone's like, okay, ready to vote for the Senate President? Aye. And you got to raise your hand. Raising your hand puts you in a place where if you didn't raise your hand, you got a problem. And that's what you're talking about. So you want to
Exactly.
go to a secret ballot. Well, your effort are you trying to make that happen inside the caucus or the formal vote?
Well,
See, because people need to understand that the caucus happens, but then the formal vote on the first day
It's
of
on the
January,
first day, yeah.
everybody makes their legal, constitutional, statutory obligation to vote for leadership. Which, do you want both of them secret?
yes, I want both of them secret. And of course, in the caucus, we vote for the caucus nominee for president and the majority leader. On the Senate floor and on the House floor, on the first day, we only vote for the Senate president. The majority leader now it's not a vote on the Senate floor. And I'm quite sure that that's true in the House. And Dan, it's really important to me because it's part of my brand.
No, you're absolutely right about that. The only January votes are for the top position.
Ones, yeah.
Right.
But you know, part of my brand as a politician is to be civil to one another. So I want to say publicly that, you know, Senate President Dominic Ruggiero, one of the nicest guys in the world. He is, you know, kind. I have, you know, sat down and had plenty of conversations, not since, you know, September, but, you know, in my 8 years there, you know, this is nothing that I have to say about him or Senator McCaffrey. These are not personal issues. They're nice people. And I always say, if they knew better, they would do better. But in my opinion, this nod to transparency while you make everybody, and it's worse than what you said. You don't just raise your hand. They call your name, Dan York, and you have to say out loud who you vote for. Right. And, you know, I believe that as long as we have this system of rewards and punishment, which is well known, ask any interview on your show, any former legislator, House or Senate, it's the routine playbook. Witness Dan DuPont, who immediately was demoted from, and he was an earnest senator. You know, the guy did a good job. And he didn't run again. I mean, you know, when you get demoted, you get your chair moved from where all the chairs sit on the Senate floor over to, you know, right next door to the Republicans, actually. We have Senator Sheehan. You know, he ran afoul of leadership a few years ago. The Ethics Commission bill, which he had championed for years, suddenly, you know, was put in another person's name and passed, finally, after all those years of struggle. And of course, I think he did something else, and they abolished the Oversight Committee, and so he lost his chairmanship. You know, so, I mean, it goes on and on. There's actually, I want to point this out, on Leader McCaffrey's wall in the Senate is a picture of when he was on the outs with the Senate leadership years ago. He, former, you know, deceased and my good friend Senator Walaska, and there might be one other. They have a picture of them with their office in in the men's bathroom. So, you know, it's so well known, the system of rewards and punishment, that they, you know, we actually poke fun of it.
All right, some devil's advocacy on this when we come back. Stay with us. So that's a Merriam-Webster definition of the word ballot, and if you keep reading other definitions, the word secrecy comes up all over the place. The Constitution, the laws, call for a ballot to elect a leadership. So your suggestion is, the inference is, the ballot should be secret, correct? Simple as that.
Absolutely, and there is a distinction between, you know, the law can only govern what we do on opening day. The Rhode Island law does not govern anything we do as a political party. So,
and you want to do that?
I do want to do both.
Right.
Well, and my argument, Dan, is if the law requires a ballot on opening day, and I suspect it may take the Supreme Court to interpret what the definition of a ballot is. I did the same thing you did with the dictionary definition, and I looked it up on 3 different dictionaries, and they all say a piece of paper, in writing, and in secret.
Got you. So here's, and if you just tuned in, go back to foxprovidence.com and see the whole conversation, or run your DVRs, because this is kind of important on how we choose the leadership in the Senate. And Senator Nesselbush is doing a courageous thing here. You've been around for a while. Senator Bell was here, Senator-elect Bell was here last week. He has in his eyes this glaze, which is that he's going to fight people all over the place. I've known him a long time. He's part of this progressive movement that is moving. Your politics are more progressive than conservative, correct?
Correct, though I don't necessarily consider myself a progressive.
Oh, okay,
I'm not even sure I know what the word means.
But I'm sure that the establishment Democrats that are in there are probably thinking, you know, Donna's gone to that ID, you know, that this is all part of the progressive push. On the House side, there are 21 reps that have stood up and said, hey, don't like the speaker, don't want the speaker. And, you know, I don't necessarily like their politics, but I appreciate their gusto. Isn't gusto at some juncture what you really need anyway? Because even though you get a secret ballot, and I get your point and I concur, most people talk about where their affiliations are. Most people talk about who they're going to vote for. I don't know that the exercise of a secret ballot exclusively protects people from being identified as in one camp or another. Talk to me about that.
I think it would, you know, if it's truly secret. And of course, you know, when I was thinking about this...
Are you saying the commiseration and the debate and the discussion in the Senate about who ought to lead won't exist? You wouldn't stand up and say, hey, listen, I'm going to vote for myself or somebody else? Or
I mean, you know, right now there is none of that, right? The speeches actually occur, you know, there's a nominating speech, but it's, you know, when you don't have people running against other people. So if, you know, if somebody didn't get a majority of votes, they would be like scratching their head. Now what do we do?
Do you project the people that are in, say, for this particular election coming up in January, in Senator Ruggiero's camp, who would be relieved for a secret ballot and go the other way simply because they're off the hook?
I think that some would, but listen, I think, again, Senator Ruggiero, Senator McCaffrey, I think they do enjoy, you know, widespread support in the Senate. For me, we have big D issues of policy, big Democratic issues from the party, and we have small d issues of process that are incredibly important. And, yeah, you know, people go to war every day. You know, I think it was in today's paper, some Rhode Islander or somebody, I think maybe from Massachusetts, lost his life in Afghanistan. People are dying for what they believe is the American way of democracy. And in my opinion, we don't measure up to those standards. You know, I often say we make a mockery of it. Maybe that's too strong.
So you want to have a system conversation here. I'm guessing this is going to be an ongoing thing for you. As long as you're duly elected, you're going to battle this. I don't know that you're going to get this accomplished, obviously.
Well, I'm going to file suit. I mean, I am a lawyer after all, Dan.
Right.
So, I mean, at some point, if we don't use a ballot... Would the
litigation be filed before this January?
No, I mean, I hope that with, you know, I don't have a lot of hope, but I hope that having conversations, they're sure to win. There is no other candidate. So, you know, and I think they do enjoy widespread support, which is why I thought it was an optimal year to be able to get the reform of a secret. There's no risk. They can't lose. Again, not only do they...
You'd vote for the Senate president?
If we had a secret ballot, I would. That would be a huge accomplishment.
See, but that kind of speaks to my question, which is you just told me you would. So, but I get what you're saying.
Well, again, under that scenario, and you know, but listen, people, you know, a lot of people told perhaps Alan Fung that they were going to vote for him too. I mean, until you get into that voting booth and do whatever it is that you really do, we don't know the will of the people, and the will of the people is fundamental to self-governance.
Well, listen, your ability to articulate the argument is at a very high level. We'll see what happens all through December as you try to influence this whole situation.
We'll see.
We'll be in touch. Appreciate your perspective. Don't be a stranger.
Thanks, Dan.
Think about it. You're thinking, it's just them people up at the State House. Well, them people up at the State House have a lot of impact on your quality of life. Final word when we come back. Sometimes if you wait around long enough, you'll actually see Democrats arguing with each other on what's right. Which is kind of it ought to be kind of a Christmas gift, to be honest with you. All right, you want another Christmas gift? Tomorrow night, Marianne Sorrentino returns to the set. She wants to talk about women, women's issues, women politics, all of that. So that'll be fun. See you on the radio at 3 until 6 on WPRO as well. It's a pleasure to have you. See ya.